The sky above Earth shimmered in a way that no one had ever seen before. It was as if the air itself was bending and twisting, creating an unnatural ripple that stretched across the horizon. People stopped what they were doing, stepping outside, to look up at the strange phenomenon. Cars pulled over on highways, children pointed excitedly from playgrounds, and scientists scrambled to gather data. Something big was happening, something far beyond anything humanity had encountered before. High above the planet, a fleet of massive alien ships emerged from the shimmering void. The vessels were unlike anything anyone had imagined. Sleek and angular, their surfaces glowed faintly with shifting colors, giving them an almost organic appearance. They hung silently in orbit, casting long shadows over the continents below. Each ship was so large that it could blot out the sun if it passed directly overhead. The sheer scale of the fleet left people breathless, and for many, fear quickly replaced awe. News outlets around the world went into overdrive, broadcasting live coverage of the event. Reporters spoke in hushed tones, struggling to make sense of what they were seeing. Governments held emergency meetings behind closed doors, trying to decide how to respond to this unprecedented situation. Military forces were placed on high alert, though no one was quite sure what weapons would even do against such advanced technology. Rumors spread like wildfire, ranging from theories about peaceful contact to fears of imminent invasion. In New York City, Jack Dawson sat in his small apartment, watching the spectacle unfold on television. He leaned back on his worn-out couch, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. His roommate, Laura Bennett, stood near the doorway, arms crossed and eyes glued to the screen. "Do you think they'll attack?" she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and unease. Jack smirked, setting his mug down on the cluttered coffee table. "Attack? Please. If they wanted to destroy us, they'd have done it already. This is just posturing." Lava raised an eyebrow, turning to face him. "You sound awfully confident for someone who spends most of his time playing video games." "Hey," Jack said, pointing a finger at her playfully. "I've seen enough sci-fi movies to know how this works. They're here to intimidate us, not annihilate us. Trust me, these guys are all talk." Lavra shook her head but couldn't help smiling slightly. "Well, I hope you're right. Because if they're not bluffing, we're screwed." Despite his nonchalant attitude, Jack wasn't entirely dismissive of the situation. He knew the stakes were high, and he understood why people were scared. But something about the whole scenario felt off. The aliens hadn't fired a single shot. They hadn't made any aggressive moves. Instead, they simply loomed there, hovering ominously in the sky like some kind of cosmic warning. Jack turned his attention back to the TV, where analysts were speculating wildly about the intentions of the extraterrestrial visitors. Some suggested they might be here to share knowledge or establish diplomatic relations. Others warned of a potential takeover, citing historical examples of colonization and conquest. Jack rolled his eyes at the more dramatic predictions. "They always jump to the worst-case scenario," he muttered under his breath. Lavra noticed his skepticism and tilted her head. "So what's your theory? Why are they here?" Jack shrugged, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. "Hard to say, maybe they're tourists." "Ever think of that? Just passing through, checking out the sights. Or maybe they're lost. Could happen, right? Space is pretty big." Lavra laughed despite herself. "Lost? Really? That's your explanation?" "Why not?" Jack replied with a grin. "Look at us. We can barely figure out how to land on Mars without blowing ourselves up. What makes you think they've got everything figured out?" Their banter was interrupted by a sudden announcement on the news. A representative from the United Nations appeared on screen, looking pale and visibly shaken. Behind him, a holographic image of one of the alien ships rotated slowly, its eerie glow illuminating the room. The man cleared his throat and began speaking. "We have received communication from the extraterrestrial vessels currently stationed in Earth's orbit," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "They identify themselves as the Zorathians and claim to represent a coalition of advanced civilizations. Their message is clear. They demand our immediate surrender." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Surrender? To whom? For what purpose? The implications were staggering, and the room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Jack stared at the screen, his earlier confidence wavering for the first time. Lavra gripped the edge of the doorway, her knuckles turning white. They want us to give up everything, the UN representative continued. Our governments, our resources, our freedom. Failure to comply will result in consequences. He didn't elaborate on what those consequences might be, but the implication was obvious: destruction, annihilation, the end of humanity as they knew it. The broadcast cut to interviews with experts and citizens alike, each offering their own take on the crisis. Some called for immediate compliance, arguing that resistance would be futile against such overwhelming power. Others urged defiance, insisting that humanity should fight to preserve its independence. Protests erupted in major cities, with people holding signs that read everything from "We will not bow" to "Save us, aliens." Back in the apartment, Jack and Lavar exchanged uneasy glances. The mood had shifted dramatically, and the playful tone of their earlier conversation was gone. "This is serious," Lavar said quietly. "What are we supposed to do now?" Jack didn't answer right away. He leaned back on the couch again, staring at the ceiling as if searching for answers written in the cracks. Finally, he spoke. "Sane. Thing we always do: adapt, survive, and maybe throw them a curveball." Lavra frowned. "A curveball? What does that mean?" Jack sat up straight, a mischievous glint returning to his eyes. "It means we don't play by their rules. These Zorathians think they can waltz in here and scare us into submission? Fine, let them try. But we're humans. We don't back down that easily." Before Lavra could respond, Jack grabbed his laptop and opened a video editing program. He started piecing together clips of himself doing absurd things, wearing a tinfoil hat, brandishing a broomstick like a sword, making exaggerated faces at the camera. He added captions and sound effects, turning the footage into a ridiculous parody of the Zorathian ultimatum. "This is our answer," Jack said as he uploaded the video to social media. "If they want to intimidate us, we'll mock them instead. Let's see how they handle a little humor." Lavra watched in disbelief as the video gained traction online. Within minutes, comments poured in, ranging from laughter to outright admiration. Memes based on Jack's antics began spreading like wildfire, and soon people around the world were joining in the fun. Humanity's response to the alien threat wasn't fear or despair, it was mockery. For the first time since the arrival of the Zorathans, there was a sense of unity among the people of Earth. Strangers shared jokes. Neighbors worked together to create their own parodies, and entire communities came alive with creativity. Even Lavrov found herself laughing as she scrolled through the endless stream of content inspired by Jack's video. But while humanity rallied behind Jack's unconventional approach, the Zorathians weren't amused. Somewhere aboard their flagship, Commander Vrax watched the viral video with growing irritation. His glowing eyes narrowed as he listened to Jack's taunts and saw the ridicule directed at his species. Pride burned within him, fueling a determination to teach these insolent humans a lesson they wouldn't forget. And so, as the sun set over New York City, casting long shadows across the streets, the stage was set for an encounter that neither side could have anticipated. Jack's light-hearted defiance had struck a nerve, and the Zorathians were about to show just how seriously they took their reputation. The next morning, the city buzzed with a strange mix of tension and excitement. News of Jack's video had spread overnight, reaching every corner of the globe. People talked about it in cafes, offices, and schools. Some laughed at the absurdity of it all, while others marveled at how one person's actions could inspire so many. But not everyone was amused, especially not the Zorathians. Commander Vrax paced the bridge of his flagship, his glowing skin pulsing faintly with irritation. On a large screen before him, Jack's face grinned mockingly as he waved a broomstick and declared himself Earth's unofficial ambassador. The commander clenched his fists, his sharp claws clicking against the metallic floor. How dare These primitive creatures treat their arrival a momentous occasion for any lesser species with such disrespect. Enough, Vrax growled, turning to his second-in-command Trelk. This mockery must end. Send a shuttle to the surface. We will confront this human personally. Trelk hesitated, his antennae twitching nervously. Commander, are you certain? This is wise? Engaging with them directly may escalate tensions further. Vrax shot him a glare that silenced any further objections. They will learn respect, Trelk. If they refuse to take us seriously, then we shall make them understand the consequences of their insolence. Within hours, a sleek alien shuttle descended from the sky, its smooth surface reflecting sunlight like liquid metal. It landed in Central Park, drawing massive crowds despite warnings from authorities to stay away. People lined the streets, holding phones aloft to capture the historic moment. Reporters jostled for position, shouting questions into cameras as police struggled to maintain order. Jack and Laveau arrived late, weaving through the throng of onlookers until they reached the edge of the park. Jack carried his laptop tucked under one arm and wore the same tinfoil hat from his video. Lavra followed close behind, clutching her jacket tightly around herself. Her eyes darted between the crowd and the imposing alien craft, which now stood motionless in the grassy clearing. Are you sure this is a good idea? Lavra whispered, glancing nervously at the ship. What if they're here to arrest you? Worse? Jack shrugged, adjusting the tin foil on his head. Relax, they're just mad because I made fun of them. Trust me, they won't hurt me, not when everyone's watching. Before Lavar could argue further, the shuttle's hatch slid open with a hiss, revealing two towering Zorthian envoys. Their armor gleamed menacingly in the sunlight, and their elongated limbs moved with an unnatural grace. Each held a weapon that looked more advanced than anything humanity had ever developed. The crowd gasped collectively as the aliens stepped forward, scanning the sea of faces with cold, unblinking eyes. One of the Zorthians pointed directly at Jack, his voice booming like thunder. You, human, you dare mock us? Jack raised an eyebrow, unfazed by the alien's intimidating presence. He pulled out a folding chair from behind his back and plopped down casually, crossing his legs. Mock you? Nah, I'm just keeping things interesting. You guys showed up uninvited, so I figured we might as well have some fun. The Zorathian's expression darkened, his glowing eyes narrowing dangerously. Fun? We are the dominant species of the galaxy. You will show us proper deference, Jack grinned, leaning back in his chair. Okay, big guy, how about a deal? Beat me at chess, and I'll personally deliver your ultimatum to the UN. Lose, and you leave Earth alone. Deal? Lavra stared at him, mouth agape. Chess? Are you serious right now? Jack winked at her without taking his eyes off the aliens. Trust me, this is gonna work. The Zorathians exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond. To them, this challenge seemed absurd, a trivial game compared to the vast power they wielded. Yet their pride wouldn't allow them to ignore it entirely. After a brief pause, the lead envoy stepped forward, his voice dripping with disdain. Very well, human. If you insist on wasting our time, we accept your challenge. But know this, failure will mean your destruction. Jack nodded, standing up and brushing imaginary dust off his jeans. Fair enough. Let's do this. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, though many still looked skeptical. Reporters shouted questions, and camera drones buzzed overhead, capturing every detail. Word of the impromptu chess match spread rapidly online, drawing millions of viewers from around the world. For the first time since the Zorathians' arrival, humanity felt a flicker of hope and a hint of mischief. A makeshift table was set up near the shuttle, complete with a standard chessboard borrowed from a nearby park-goer. One of the Zorathians activated a holographic interface on his wrist, projecting a three-dimensional replica of the board beside the physical one. Jack examined both setups briefly before shrugging and sitting down. Fancy tech, he said, flashing a grin, but it won't save you. As the game began, the atmosphere grew tense. The Zorathian played methodically, analyzing each move with precision that suggested centuries of experience. Jack, however, adopted a more unpredictable style. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers rhythmically against the armrest as he studied the board. Occasionally, he would glance up at the crowd or crack a joke to lighten the mood. "You seem pretty confident for someone playing against superior beings," the Zorathian remarked after several moves, his tone laced with condescension. Jack chuckled, moving one of his pawns forward. "Superior? Sure, you've got fancy ships and glowy skin, but brains? That's where I shine." Lavra watched anxiously from the sidelines, occasionally whispering advice during breaks. "Be careful," she murmured during one such pause. "He's setting traps." "I know," Jack replied, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "That's why I'm letting him think he's winning." True to his word, Jack allowed the Zorathian to gain control of the center of the board early on. The alien seemed pleased with his progress, his movements becoming more relaxed as he anticipated victory. But Jack wasn't done yet. With a series of bold sacrifices, he forced the Zorathian onto the defensive, gradually turning the tide of the game. Hours passed, and the crowd remained captivated. Even the other Zorathian envoy, who had initially stood stoically by the shuttle, began showing signs of unease. The lead envoy's confidence wavered as Jack executed a stunning sequence of moves that left his king vulnerable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack made his final play, a daring gambit that trapped the Zorathian king decisively. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers, clapping and whistling as Jack leaned back triumphantly. The Zorathian stared at the board in stunned silence, his glowing eyes dimming slightly. "You win," he admitted reluctantly, his voice barely audible over the noise. Jack stood up, extending a hand toward the alien. "Good game. Now, about that leaving Earth alone thing." The Zorathian ignored the gesture, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he turned and marched back to the shuttle, followed closely by his companion. The hatch closed behind them, and moments later the vessel lifted off, disappearing into the sky. As the crowd celebrated, Lava approached Jack, shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't believe that actually worked." Jack grinned, slinging an arm around her shoulders. "Told you, chess is universal." Though the immediate threat had passed, no one knew what the future held. Would the Zorathians honor their agreement? Or would they return with renewed vengeance? For now, however, humanity reveled in its hard-won victory, a testament to the power of wit, courage, and a little bit of humor. The celebration in Central Park was electric. People cheered, danced, and hugged strangers as if they had just won a war. Jack stood at the center of it all, still wearing his tinfoil hat, basking in the unexpected spotlight. Reporters swarmed him, shoving microphones into his face and firing questions faster than he could answer. Lavra stayed close by, occasionally pulling him aside to remind him not to say anything too reckless. "You did it," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "You actually beat them?" Jack shrugged modestly, though his grin betrayed his pride. "It wasn't that hard. They're smart, sure, but they don't understand humans. We're unpredictable. That's our edge." While the crowd celebrated, not everyone shared their enthusiasm. In quiet corners of the park, some people whispered anxiously about what might come next. The Zorathians hadn't attacked after losing the chess match, but no one knew for certain whether they would honor their promise to leave Earth alone. Could humanity really trust aliens who had arrived with threats and intimidation? Back aboard the Zorathian flagship, Commander Vrax paced furiously across the bridge. His glowing skin pulsed with anger, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The memory of his envoy's defeat burned in his mind like an open wound. He couldn't believe that such primitive creatures, soft, fragile beings made of flesh and bone, had humiliated him in front of the galaxy. This cannot stand. Vrax snarled, slamming a fist against the console. "We are the Zorathians. We do not tolerate mockery." Trelk, ever cautious, stepped forward hesitantly. "Commander, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. These humans, they are unlike any species we have encountered before. Their behavior is erratic, their motivations unclear. Engaging further may only lead to more complications." Vrax spun around, his eyes blazing. "Complications? Do you think I care about complications? This is about honor, Trelk. If we allow this insult to go unpunished, what message does that send to the rest of the galaxy? That we are weak? That we can be trifled with? Trelk lowered his head, knowing better than to argue further. Instead, he offered a suggestion. Perhaps there is another way to assert our dominance without direct confrontation. A demonstration of our power, subtle yet undeniable, to remind them of their place. Vrax paused, considering the idea. Slowly, a cruel smile spread across his face. Yes, a demonstration. Something that will shake their confidence without provoking outright rebellion. Prepare the energy disruptors. We will disable their communication networks and power grids. Let them experience chaos and fear. When they beg for mercy, we will offer them terms they cannot refuse. Meanwhile, back on Earth, life began returning to some semblance of normalcy, or at least as normal as it could be under the shadow of an alien fleet. Governments issued statements urging calm, though their leaders privately debated how to prepare for the possibility of renewed hostilities. Military forces remained on high alert, while scientists worked tirelessly to analyze data from the Zorathian ships, hoping to find a weakness. Jack and Lavar returned to their apartment, exhausted but exhilarated. The media frenzy had followed them home, with reporters camping outside their building and drones buzzing around the windows. Jack tried to ignore it, focusing instead on uploading new videos to capitalize on his newfound fame. But even he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the Zorathians weren't done with them yet. They'll come back, Jack said suddenly, breaking the silence as they sat together on the couch. They're not the type to walk away after losing. Lavra looked up from her phone, concern etched on her face. What makes you so sure? Because they're proud, Jack replied, leaning forward. Proud and arrogant. Losing to us. Hurt their ego. They'll want revenge, but they'll try to make it look justified. Mark my words, they'll hit us where it hurts. As if on cue, the lights flickered and went out. The hum of electricity faded, leaving the room bathed in darkness. Outside, the cityscape dimmed dramatically as streetlights, billboards, and skyscrapers lost power. A low murmur of confusion rippled through the streets below. What's happening? Lavra asked, fumbling for her phone to use its flashlight. Jack stood up, peering out the window. They're messing with us, just like I said. Across the globe, similar scenes unfolded. Satellites went dark, cutting off internet and phone services. Hospitals switched to backup generators, and emergency broadcasts urged citizens to stay calm. The Zorathians' plan was working without communication or electricity. Society began to fray at the edges. Panic spread quickly, fueled by uncertainty and fear. In New York, Jack and Lavar joined the throngs of people gathering in public spaces, seeking safety in numbers. Despite the chaos, Jack remained oddly calm. He navigated the crowded streets with purpose, his mind racing. If the Zorathians wanted to play dirty, then humanity needed to fight back smarter. We need to organize, Jack said, addressing a small group of neighbors who had gathered in a community center. We can't rely on governments or militaries right now. They're scrambling just like the rest of us. But we have something they don't expect: creativity. One man raised his hand skeptically. Creativity? Against aliens with advanced technology? How's that supposed to help? Jack grinned, pulling out a marker and scribbling on a nearby whiteboard. Simple, we adapt. Use what we've got, improvise. Remember, these guys don't know us. They underestimate us. That's our advantage. Over the next few hours, Jack rallied volunteers to brainstorm ideas. Some suggested setting traps using everyday items, while others proposed creating decoys to confuse the aliens. Lavra pitched the idea of spreading misinformation online, leveraging social media to sow doubt among the Zorathians. Though many of the plans sounded far-fetched, the group embraced them with determination. By nightfall, makeshift defenses began appearing throughout the city. Neighborhoods banded together, pooling resources and skills to protect themselves. Rooftops were transformed into lookout points, and abandoned buildings became hiding spots stocked with supplies. Even children contributed, painting signs and crafting crude weapons from household objects. As dawn broke over the horizon, the Zorathians launched their next move. Small drones descended into the city, scanning for signs of resistance. To their surprise, they found nothing but empty streets and silent buildings. Humanity had vanished. Retreating into the shadows to regroup and plan its counterattack, Commander Vrax watched the footage from his flagship, his frustration mounting. "Where are they?" he demanded, glaring at the screen. "Why do they hide instead of surrendering?" Trelk hesitated, unsure how to respond. Perhaps they are learning, Commander. Adapting to our tactics." Vrax slammed his fist against the console again. "Then we must adapt faster. Increase the frequency of our attacks. Target their most vulnerable areas. Force them to reveal themselves." But humanity wasn't ready to give up. Hidden in basements and alleys, people continued to resist in ways the Zorathians couldn't anticipate. Graffiti mocked the invaders, and homemade devices disrupted their surveillance systems. Every time the aliens thought they had gained the upper hand, humanity struck back with ingenuity and resilience. For Jack and Lavar, the days blurred together in a haze of planning and action. They coordinated efforts between neighborhoods, ensuring that resources were shared and strategies remained flexible. Through it all, Jack's optimism never wavered. "They're tough," he admitted one evening, sitting on a rooftop with Lavar as they watched the alien ships loom overhead. "But they're not unbeatable. We've survived worse than this. As long as we stick together, we'll find a way." Lavra nodded, though her expression was sober. "I hope you're right. Because if we lose—" "We won't," Jack interrupted. Firmly, "Not today, not ever." And so, the battle for Earth continued not with brute force, but with cunning, unity, and a refusal to bow to fear. Humanity had proven itself capable of standing up to the Zorathians, even in the face of overwhelming odds. What remained to be seen was whether that defiance would be enough to secure their freedom, or merely delay the inevitable. The aftermath of the Zorathian retreat left Earth in a state of cautious celebration. The skies, once darkened by alien ships, now seemed impossibly vast and open. People poured into the streets, embracing strangers, singing songs, and lighting candles to honor those who had been lost during the conflict. In parks, squares, and neighborhoods, impromptu gatherings turned into festivals of resilience and hope. Jack and Lavra found themselves at the center of it all, their faces plastered on news feeds and social media as symbols of humanity's defiance. But for Jack, the victory felt bittersweet. As he stood on a rooftop overlooking the city watching fireworks light up the night sky, he couldn't shake the weight of what they had endured. "We did it," Lavra said softly, joining him with 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You did it." Jack shook his head, accepting the mug but keeping his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not just me, everyone. This wasn't about one person. It was about all of us. If people hadn't come together, we'd still be hiding in basements." Lavra nodded, sipping her drink thoughtfully. "Still, you gave them something to believe. In that video, the chess match, the resistance, you showed them we could fight back without losing ourselves." Jack chuckled dryly. "Yeah, well, next time I'll let someone else wear the tinfoil hat." Despite the levity in his tone, there was no denying the toll the past weeks had taken. Exhaustion lined his face, and his hands trembled slightly as he raised the mug to his lips. Lavra noticed but didn't say anything. She knew Jack well enough to understand that he carried burdens silently. Preferring to focus on others rather than himself. In the days that followed, life began to return to some semblance of normalcy. Power grids were slowly restored, and communication networks came back online. Governments issued statements thanking citizens for their bravery and promising reforms to prevent future crises. Scientists worked around the clock to study the wreckage left behind by the Zorathians, hoping to unlock secrets that could protect Earth from future threats. For Jack and Lavar, however, the battle wasn't entirely over. They became unofficial spokespeople for the resistance movement, traveling to different cities to share their story and encourage unity. Their message was simple: humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or weapons, but in its ability to adapt, collaborate, and persevere. During one such visit to Chicago, They addressed a packed auditorium filled with survivors eager to hear their perspective. Jack took the stage first, adjusting the microphone nervously before speaking. When the Zorathians arrived, they expected us to roll over and give up. But we didn't. Why? Because we're humans. We don't back down. We don't lose faith. Even when things look impossible, we find a way. The crowd erupted into applause, and Lavra stepped forward to add her thoughts. What Jack means is that this victory belongs to all of us. It wasn't just about fighting aliens, it was about proving to ourselves that we're stronger than fear, stronger than division, and stronger than despair. As they spoke, cameras captured every word, broadcasting their message to audiences worldwide. People listened intently, inspired by the reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could rise above. Meanwhile, aboard the remnants of the Zorathian fleet, Commander Vrax seethed with anger and humiliation. His once proud armada was reduced to a fraction of its former glory, limping through space toward their home planet. The loss of the command center and the failure to subjugate Earth was a stain on his reputation that would take centuries to erase. Trelk approached cautiously, his antennae twitching as he gauged his commander's mood. "Sir, perhaps this defeat will teach us humility. Humans are unlike any species we have encountered. Their unpredictability makes them dangerous opponents." Vrax growled, slamming a fist against the console. "Dangerous? They are primitives. Flesh and bone. How could they defeat us?" "Because they fought as one," Trelk replied quietly. "They adapted. They improvised. And they never surrendered. Perhaps we underestimated them." Vrax's glowing eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Deep down he knew Trelk was right. Humanity's resistance had exposed a flaw in the Zorathians' approach, one rooted in arrogance and complacency. For the first time in millennia, the Zorathians had been forced to confront the limits of their dominance. Back on Earth, the lessons learned from the conflict began shaping a new era of cooperation. Nations set aside old rivalries to form alliances aimed at defending the planet. Research teams collaborated across borders, pooling knowledge and resources to develop technologies inspired by the Zorathians' advancements. Even ordinary citizens embraced a renewed sense of community, volunteering their time and skills to rebuild shattered cities and support those in need. The stalemate between humanity and the Zorathians dragged on for weeks. The aliens' energy. Disruptors continued to wreak havoc, plunging cities into darkness and crippling infrastructure. But despite the chaos, humanity refused to crumble. Instead, people adapted in ways that surprised even themselves. Neighbors who had once barely spoken now worked side by side, sharing food, tools, and ideas. Communities transformed into tight-knit networks of survival, each one contributing to the larger effort to resist the invaders. Jack and Lavra became central figures in their neighborhood's resistance movement. Jack's knack for thinking outside the box earned him a reputation as a leader, though he insisted he was just the guy with the tinfoil hat. His unconventional strategies kept morale high, while Laura's organizational skills ensured that resources were distributed efficiently. Together, they inspired others to keep fighting, no matter how bleak things seemed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack gathered a group of volunteers in an abandoned warehouse. The space was dimly lit by candles and flashlights, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Maps of the city were spread out on a makeshift table, marked with scribbles and notes. Everyone listened intently as Jack outlined his latest plan. "We can't keep hiding forever," he said, pointing to a section of the map. "They've got drones patrolling the streets, but they're predictable. If we time it right, we can lure them into a trap." A young woman named Mia raised her hand hesitantly. "What kind of trap?" Jack grinned, holding up a small device cobbled together from spare parts. "This baby? It's a signal jammer. We'll set it up in key locations to confuse their drones. When they send reinforcements to investigate, we hit them with everything we've got: homemade explosives, decoys, you name it." The group murmured in approval, though some looked skeptical. One older man, Frank, crossed his arms and frowned. And what happens if it doesn't work? What if they catch us? Then we improvise, Jack replied without hesitation. That's what we've been doing this whole time. We don't have fancy weapons or spaceships, but we've got something better heart. As long as we stick together, we'll figure it out. Lavra stepped forward, adding her own encouragement. He's right. This isn't just about winning. It's about showing them, and ourselves, that we won't back down, no matter what. The volunteers nodded, their resolve strengthening. They spent the rest of the night preparing for the operation, dividing tasks and rehearsing their roles. By dawn, everything was in place. The signal jammers were hidden in strategic locations, and decoy devices designed to mimic human activity were scattered throughout the area. All that remained was to wait. As expected, the Zorathian drones detected the false signals and moved to investigate. Their sleek forms hovered silently above the streets, scanning for signs of life. When they found nothing, they transmitted coordinates to their mothership, requesting backup. Moments later, a squad of armored Zorathian soldiers descended from the sky, their weapons glowing ominously, unbeknownst to the aliens. Jack and his team were watching from the shadows. Using binoculars, Jack signaled the start of the ambush. Volunteers activated the signal jammers, creating bursts of interference that disoriented the drones. At the same time, others detonated homemade explosives, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. The Zorathians scrambled to respond, but their advanced technology was useless against the chaos unfolding around them. For the first time since their arrival, the invaders appeared confused and vulnerable. Jack seized the opportunity, leading a charge toward the distracted soldiers. Armed with little more than pipes, bats, and sheer determination, the humans fought back with ferocity. Though outnumbered and outgunned, they relied on speed and surprise. To gain the upper hand, Lavra stayed behind the front lines, coordinating the retreat once the initial attack succeeded. She used a bullhorn to shout instructions, ensuring that everyone fell back before the Zorathians could regroup. Despite the danger, the operation went off without major casualties, a testament to careful planning and teamwork. Back at the warehouse, Jack and Lavra eventually returned to New York, where they resumed their quiet lives, but nothing was quite the same. Strangers recognized them on the street, offering thanks or asking for advice. Reporters occasionally knocked on their door, seeking interviews or exclusive stories. Despite the attention, Jack remained humble, often deflecting praise onto others. No, I never wanted to be a hero, he admitted to Lavra one evening as they sat on their apartment balcony. I just wanted to make people laugh, to remind them not to take life too seriously. Lavra smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. The aftermath of the Zorathian retreat left Earth in a state of cautious celebration. The skies, once darkened by alien ships, now seemed impossibly vast and open. People poured into the streets, embracing strangers, singing songs and lighting candles to honor those who had been lost during the conflict. In parks, squares, and neighborhoods, impromptu gatherings turned into festivals of resilience and hope. Jack and Lavra found themselves at the center of it all, their faces plastered on news feeds and social media as symbols of humanity's defiance. But for Jack, the victory felt bittersweet. As he stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, watching fireworks light up the night sky, he couldn't shake the weight of what they had endured. We did it, Lavra said softly, joining him with 2 cups of coffee in hand. You did it. Jack shook his head, accepting the mug but keeping his eyes fixed on the horizon. Not just me, everyone. This wasn't about one person, it was about all of us. If people hadn't come together, we'd still be hiding in basements. Lavra nodded, sipping her drink thoughtfully. Still, you gave them something to believe. In that video, the chess match, the resistance, you showed them we could fight back without losing ourselves. Jack chuckled dryly. Yeah, well, next time I'll let someone else wear the tinfoil hat. Despite the levity in his tone, there was no denying the toll the past weeks had taken. Exhaustion lined his face and his hands trembled slightly as he raised the mug to his lips. Lavra noticed but didn't say anything. She knew Jack well enough to understand that he carried burdens silently. Preferring to focus on others rather than himself. In the days that followed, life began to return to some semblance of normalcy. Power grids were slowly restored, and communication networks came back online. Governments issued statements thanking citizens for their bravery and promising reforms to prevent future crises. Scientists worked around the clock to study the wreckage left behind by the Zorathians, hoping to unlock secrets that could protect Earth from future threats. For Jack and Lavra, however, the battle wasn't entirely over. They became unofficial spokespeople for the resistance movement, traveling to different cities to share their story and encourage unity. Their message was simple: humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or weapons, but in its ability to adapt, collaborate, and persevere. During one such visit to Chicago, they addressed a packed auditorium filled with survivors eager to hear their perspective. Jack took the stage first, adjusting the microphone nervously before speaking. When the Zorathians arrived, they expected us to roll over and give up, but we didn't. Why? Because we're humans. We don't back down. We don't lose faith. Even when things look impossible, we find a way. The crowd erupted into applause, and Lavra stepped forward to add her thoughts. What Jack means is that this victory belongs to all of us. It wasn't just about fighting aliens. It was about proving to ourselves that we're stronger than fear, stronger than division, and stronger than despair. As they spoke, cameras captured every word, broadcasting their message to audiences worldwide. People listened intently, inspired by the reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could rise above. Meanwhile, aboard the remnants of the Zorathian fleet, Commander Vrax seethed with anger and humiliation. His once proud armada was reduced to a fraction of its former glory, limping through space toward their home planet. The loss of the command center and the failure to subjugate Earth was a stain on his reputation that would take centuries to erase. Trelk approached cautiously, his antennae twitching as he gauged his commander's mood. Sir, perhaps this defeat will teach us humility. Humans are unlike any species we have encountered. Their unpredictability makes them dangerous opponents. Vrax growled, slamming a fist against the console. Dangerous? They are primitives. Flesh and bone. How could they defeat us? Because they fought as one, Trelk replied quietly. They adapted. They improvised. And they never surrendered. Perhaps we underestimated them. Vrax's glowing eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Deep down he knew Trelk was right. Humanity's resistance had exposed a flaw in the Zorathians' approach, one rooted in arrogance and complacency. For the first time in millennia, the Zorathians had been forced to confront the limits of their dominance. Back on Earth, the lessons learned from the conflict began shaping a new era of cooperation. Nations set aside old rivalries to form alliances aimed at defending the planet. Research teams collaborated across borders, pooling knowledge and resources to develop technologies inspired by the Zorathians' advancements. Even ordinary citizens embraced a renewed sense of community, volunteering their time and skills to rebuild shattered cities and support those in need. Jack and Lavra eventually returned to New York, where they resumed their quiet lives, but nothing was quite the same. Strangers recognized them on the street, offering thanks or asking for advice. Reporters occasionally knocked on their door, seeking interviews or exclusive stories. Despite the attention, Jack remained humble, often deflecting praise onto others. You know, I never wanted to be a hero, he admitted to Lavra one evening as they sat on their apartment balcony. I just wanted to make people laugh. To remind them not to take life too seriously. Lavra smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder.